Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be ranking the top 10 most important NFL free agents for Dynasty Fantasy Football.
Hike!
So in this episode, we're going to be giving a preview of who we think you need to keep your eye on heading into this free agency period, which is not too long away here, Joe. So let's talk about the first player who some may say is not a free agent, but he technically is, and that's wide receiver Tee Higgins. He received the franchise tag for the Cincinnati Bengals. The likelihood is they're not going to tag and trade, but we've seen it before. Davante Adams was tagged and traded. And then you have also Tee Higgins who could sign somewhere with an offer sheet. Now, the team would have to give up 2 first-round picks. I kind of doubt that anyone would do that. More than likely he stays at Cincinnati. His value doesn't change, right, Joe? Or is there a concern back-to-back tags? Are they going to tag him again? That'd be the third and final time. Like, where's your head at from a dynasty perspective with Tee Higgins?
Yeah, well, honestly, I think it's good that he's staying with the Bengals from fantasy and dynasty perspective. And then hopefully they work out some sort of a long-term deal. I think that's kind of also kind of the purpose of the tag, despite the fact that they are getting a discount, even though this is the second time that they have tagged them based on what other wide receivers are getting in the market. And honestly, what Tee Higgins would have received on the open market. I mean, to tag him for $25 million, that's a lot less than what he would have gotten on the open market. But happy he's going to be still with Joe Burrow and with Jamar Chase in the Bengals offense.
Yeah, I think most people would be. It's just a question of we're doing this all over again next year, more than likely.
Yeah, like I said, unless the franchise tag does buy them some time to be able to work out a long-term deal as well. So we'll see if that happens, but he might have to play the full year on the tag, and then maybe next offseason they maybe get something done.
Real quick, though, what does this say, though, about like Jermaine Burton and Andre Iosivas? Some younger guys that they're really excited about. Possibility that if Tee Higgins left, you draft so that you can backfill, guys you can't sign, and next man up mentality that's for them to be able to step up. Doesn't really bode well, I don't think, for either one of those guys.
Yeah, I think Iosivas, is a fine number 3. I don't know if he's a number 2 type of guy, and Jermaine Burton's a young guy that could still develop. And hey, if they decide to move on from Tee Higgins after this year, Burton heading into his 3rd year to possibly get a starting opportunity, would be a good outlook and reasons to kind of, from a dynasty perspective, hang on to him just in case that situation does arise.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So let's go to number 2, and that's going to be wide receiver Chris Godwin, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he did end the season on IR, and he's 29 years old as of today. So, Joe, what are your thoughts here on Chris Godwin? It sounds like we don't really know whether he's not going to be tagged. So,
Right.
What do you think of his value right now from a dynasty perspective? Do you think it could really shift one way or the other?
Obviously, that for his value, the best thing would be to stick with Tampa Bay. But besides that, I think his value should still be okay. I think Chris Godwin is a good enough wide receiver to retain value no matter where he ends up. And we've seen, if used correctly, before that injury, he was the wide receiver 2, having a fantastic year. I know, he's going to battle from an injury. And honestly, you say he's 29, but heck, he's a lot younger than some of these other guys we're going to be talking about here that are, over the age of 30. So I think Godwin's going to get a lot of interest and should get a decent amount of money.
I'm a little nervous. He's going to be the belle of the ball. There's no question about it. But I don't like him going to New England. I don't like some of these options that they're talking about. I like him in Tampa. Don't know about elsewhere. So I'm a little concerned.
How come you don't like him in New England?
Too many people are excited about Drake May. I don't really think he showed all that much for people to give him all.
Hey, I'm one of those guys that are excited about Drake May.
Yeah, well, I think you're getting way too ahead of yourself, which is unlike you. It's uncharacteristic, really.
Why are you
What did he show?
I just watching him. I think showed a lot of poise and good playmaking ability, and the fact that he was able to make some plays with like some outcasts and rejects from a wide receiver standpoint on that team, no real go-to target, and the fact that he was able to do what he did show. I was impressed with his rookie year, and now that got some better coaching as well, I think year 2 should be better for him.
Yeah, Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniel, they're going to neuter him. He's not going to be. I mean, they're going to be, strong
How is Josh
defense.
McDaniels gonna neuter him? I mean,
What do you mean? Like they're just going to run the ball? They're gonna play stout defense. They're not going to unleash him. I mean, if you had a guy like Ben Johnson in there as your offensive coordinator, maybe. But
yeah, but we've seen Josh McDaniels' offenses do just fine. Yeah, when he's the offensive coordinator, call him McDummy because he was a terrible head coach, not because he wasn't a good offensive coordinator. I think, heck, you got to admit that's an upgrade from what they had last year there. And we'll see. I mean, you get a piece like Godwin as well. I mean, that's only going to help him. And music to my ears as a person who drafted Javon Baker, hearing good things from Vrabel that he likes Javon Baker.
All right, well, let's not get down this rabbit hole here. Let's go to number 3, and that's going to be quarterback Sam Darnold. Now, I think both of you and me are not even looking at it from a standpoint of how Sam Darnold, the player himself, is going to affect. Because depending on your super flex or not, he may not all that matter. But it's how the quarterback position affects everybody around them. And depending on where he goes as a quarterback, it changes the landscape for that team and those pass catchers.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess what I'm most interested in is just seeing, how much of this Sam Darnold resurgence that we've seen was just the, Kevin O'Connell and being able to play in the Minnesota Vikings offense, or did he really truly benefit from that year with Kyle Shanahan in San Fran, sitting behind Brock Purdy, getting that year of quote unquote quarterback rehab that he did prior to getting to the Vikings, and will he still have that sustained success on a new team? And that's what I'm most interested in seeing this upcoming season with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I mean, he saw ghosts before. All of a sudden, he didn't anymore. So was it a Kevin O'Connell fix, or is he just on the straight and narrow now? We'll see.
Well, I mean, those last 2 games, he started seeing ghosts again because Kevin O'Connell was not doing him any favors.
No.
Constantly sending out those guys 15 yards plus and making Sam Darnold hang out of the ball, and yet the offensive line was giving him no time at all.
So let's head over to number 4, which is running back Najee Harris, first running back that we're going to be talking about here. I think he's the marquee guy of the group. We saw last year Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. You saw Joe Mixon traded. There was a lot of activity in the running back circles. This is a lot better draft class for running backs than last year, where you saw Jonathan Brooks, where he was the 3rd latest running back ever taken in the draft era. So I guess there have been rumblings that he may go back to Pittsburgh, which I think is honestly a bad situation. I think if you're a Najee owner, you're hoping he goes somewhere else. I think he needs a change of scenery.
I'd honestly be surprised if he goes back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, that is just
supposedly Tomlin wants him. That's what the rumor is.
That's interesting because that goes against everything that they've been about. They've been about drafting these running backs, using them up all they can for 4 years, selling them to the wayside, and repeating the process. And what better year to repeat the process than this year with this running back draft class? So that's why I'd be surprised if he goes to Steelers. But I agree. I think I'd like to see Najee get an opportunity, with a new team, and maybe a team that will make him more of a featured back and more of a bell cow guy, as well as hopefully they have an improved offensive line, because I think that's also something holding back Najee.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. I mean, James Conner before him, Le'Veon Bell before him. I mean, and Tomlin's been the coach this whole time. So
right.
So heading over to number 5, who technically isn't a free agent at the moment of this episode, but that could very well change by the time this episode drops. And we anticipate he will be a free agent. That's quarterback Aaron Rodgers at number 5. Now, you could be saying, how could you possibly having him here? He's only got probably 1 year left. It's true. But again, let's say he goes to the Giants. How does that affect Malik Neighbors' value? You're hearing rumors about that. Aaron Rodgers still can support players. I mean, even though Garrett Wilson didn't have as good of a year as we had thought he would, he still had good numbers. So even at the age that Aaron Rodgers is, he can still impact those around him quite a bit.
Yeah, 100%. And, Davante Adams still did well with it, Aaron Rodgers in his, time with the Jets as well. So you're right. Given his age, and I mean, the latest rumor is that he is going to go to the Giants, which would be interesting to see what they'd be able to do with him and pair him with a guy like Malik Neighbors to see how he can support them. And I think they're also going to be aggressive and will bring in some other wide receiver talent. So I think that'd be an intriguing spot for him, and both for his dynasty value and, for like the supporting cast, as you mentioned.
A part of me would love to see him follow the same arc as Favre and go to the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, man. That fact that so far they've had the exact same, arc and the same places, and the age in which they're doing these things is just kind of wild. I mean, unfortunately, the Vikings don't really need a quarterback, or else that could we could see that.
No, they're talking about re-signing Darnold. That wouldn't preclude them from signing Rodgers if they're still concerned about ramping up McCarthy.
I think if anything, if they don't go Darnold, I think they just hold on to Daniel Jones.
Well, let's head over to the next guy, who is a good friend of Aaron Rodgers in the Rodgers neighborhood, and that's wide receiver Davante Adams. He was recently released by the Jets, making him a free agent. Rumor has it was that he was on the block, but nobody wanted him. No surprise, his contract was quite substantial. Joe, what are your thoughts on Davante Adams? This will be kind of interesting. First time to my knowledge, he's been a free agent because he's with the Packers, got traded to the Raiders, and then from the Raiders got traded to the Jets. So first time he'll be a free agent, as well as Aaron Rodgers before him, who we just talked about. Thoughts on Adams?
Yeah, I mean, despite his age, I still think a lot could, depending on his landing spot. Especially at his age, I would have said if he was younger, he is quarterback proof. It didn't really much matter where he goes. But I think now that he is 31 years old, that could matter a little bit more. But talking about a guy that's just been able to consistently get 1,000 yards, despite the quarterbacks he's played with, I still think he's got some stuff left. And, if you're a contending team, a valuable dynasty asset for you.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about some other receivers, and you could say that we have him too high, but he's been the model of consistency, and he's not coming off an injury.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. Where, you mentioned some of the other guys we're going to be talking about later are. So I think 6 is the right spot for him.
So going to number 7, that's wide receiver Amari Cooper of the now Buffalo Bills, traded from the Browns to the Bills. Now, what's interesting about him is that towards the end of the season, sounds like he had some nagging injuries that may have resulted in him not performing as well in Buffalo, although they did have the everybody eats mentality. I don't know. I am a Bills fan, but I haven't been keeping up. There haven't been much rumblings of the fact that they would re-sign Cooper, to my knowledge. What are your thoughts on Cooper here?
Yeah, Amari Cooper's a guy that I'm just not that excited about. I'm kind of nervous about him, despite, he's over 30, and he just always seems to have these nagging injuries that kind of hold him back. And depending on where he goes, maybe that could change my mind. But I'm concerned about him from a fantasy standpoint, and honestly, how much left he's got to offer.
He's 31.
Yeah,
he probably has a year, maybe 2 left. It's a similar situation as Davante, but even though I think Davante is older, I think you and I both have more confidence in Davante going forward here.
Yeah, I just have seen it, and he's been just productive. And I get, like, before last year, Amari Cooper was still decent, but I don't know, last year was just really disappointing. And I know the quarterback situation and, Cleveland wasn't the best. And for whatever reason, him and Buffalo just didn't work out. And maybe it was just those injuries. But if he's got those nagging injuries again, then no matter where he goes, I think there's potential for disappointment for you.
So heading over to number 8, we've got wide receiver Stefon Diggs, another aging receiver, except for I believe he's 31 as well, but he is recovering from an ACL tear. So Question is where's Stefon Diggs? Again, first time he's a free agent as well. Interesting kind of theme here. Traded from the Vikings to the Bills, Bills to trade to the Texans. So what are your thoughts on Stefon Diggs? I think he may have more juice maybe than Cooper, but did sustain a more severe injury. And he's got to recover and rehabilitate from that and come back to his old self at an older age.
Yeah. I mean, that is the question. How does he come back from the torn ACL he suffered last year? But if he can recover okay, as, the technology on the ACLs has gotten better and guys have been able to come back from him. I mean, he is 31, so he's an older guy. So that does put a little wrinkle in that. But I just really like what I saw from him with his time in Houston last year. And if he could, kind of get remotely close to that, I think behind Davante, I would be excited about Stefon Diggs and more excited about him than Amari Cooper.
Oh, so you think we went wrong by this and should have put Diggs at 7 and Cooper at 8?
I mean, I think Cooper could be safer to put at 7, just because he had some nagging injuries and not coming back from the ACL. I just think I like
more upside with Diggs.
Yeah, depending on how he recovers from that ACL, of course.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Head over to number 9. We've got running back Aaron Jones. The Vikings now. He is getting up there in age, but we have seen running backs. It's been a little bit of a change of the guard. Even a guy like, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. You just saw Saquon got a 2-year extension for a whopping amount of money. So we are seeing a little bit of difference here. And Jones, although maybe not as productive, still showed flashes of his former self while he was in Minnesota. I know your Broncos are pretty hot on the rumor mill on him right now.
Yeah, they definitely are. It's interesting. I think he could be an interesting fit for the Broncos. But my concern, if I would be concerned for his value though if he does go to the Broncos, because he's, Sean Payton doesn't really feature anybody, and if he continues this whole in and out thing after one play, the Broncos backfield is just very frustrating, and you just can't rely on anybody because nobody gets consistent touches. So unless that changes with Sean Payton's confidence, because maybe it's just a confidence level thing, because it's just weird. And when he was with New Orleans, we saw him give plenty of workload to multiple backs, back when he even had Mark Ingram, Reggie Bush, or even Ingram and Kamara at times. He seems to have that power guy and then do it all back. And he was able to support them, and those guys were both relevant for fantasy. So it'll be interesting to see if he does go to the Broncos, how that all works out.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough with him because in my mind, he only has a year left. I don't really see his longevity going that longer. So it's hard to rank him higher as a more important NFL free agent when it relates to Dynasty. So lastly, at number 10, we've got running back J.K. Dobbins. This one's an interesting one because he signed a prove-it deal with the Chargers and was later in free agency. He was not in the first wave. So what's his market going to be? He obviously was very productive this past year, but I just don't know how many options are even out there for him. If I'm a Dobbins owner from a Dynasty perspective, I would have told you should have been trading him a long time ago, because unless he goes back to the Chargers, which he's familiar with Greg Roman, or goes to Baltimore, which he's not going to Baltimore because they got Derrick Henry. I don't know where he's going.
Yeah, I don't know where he's going, and that's the risky thing for me with him is Chargers were a perfect landing spot for him. Back with that Baltimore system, good offensive line, saw the results. He's going to be, he had to prove a deal. He's going to be looking to get paid. I don't know if the money is going to be there, just because even though there's not that many running backs on the market, just this running back draft class, he could be another, late signee once teams figure out who they miss out on in the draft or they have the roster spots to fill. But I am nervous about him, and if people are just thinking the same amount of production this year from that we saw last year, because that could all change with the change of scenery.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you're seeing this episode for the first time, I would tell you got to go find a trade partner and get rid of him, because I think my prediction is he won't sign till wave 2. And if he does sign in wave 2, I'm not even sure who it will be or what role it will be. Like you said, it worked out so nicely. The Chargers, they didn't have anybody. They had Gus Edwards. They drafted Kamani Vidal. It was a great opportunity for J.K. Dobbins to really take advantage. But if it's not there, I just don't know.
Yeah, unless it's back to the Chargers, to your point, and they don't really – I mean, I would assume that they draft somebody, but if they don't bring anyone else in free agency, that'd be ideal. But if not there, I'm not that interested in Dobbins.
So that does it for this episode. Overall, I think Joe and I would view this free agency class as quite lackluster compared to some of the other ones we've had. We've been spoiled over the years. This one, not as much, but it's still early yet. We may start seeing some more cuts kind of come through before the new league year transition. So this list, although you won't see us, this list would probably change for you as these players end up being released by teams. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time.